Welcome back to the second video on logic formulas. In this video we're going to be talking about how we can handle errors when working with formulas. Let's jump right in and get started. Okay, so before we begin, let's go ahead and make some errors that could possibly come up when you're working. And like when you're doing a VLOOKUP and if something doesn't exist, like the word test within this column, and it will return the NA error. Or if you have test and you're trying to add it to 10, that obviously there's going to be a value error. If you go ahead and you're going to reference a cell and then but you just leave it as H and you don't tell it what, like H10 or something, you just leave it at H and then say plus 10 as well, that's going to be a name error because Excel thinks that you're talking about a named cell here with the letter H, but obviously that doesn't exist. Also, there's the easy one, 0 divided by 0. That's going to give you the div or dividing, like it doesn't make any sense. You divide it by 0, there's an error there. And the reference error. So you've probably seen this before. You can reference like G14, hit enter, then you come into G14, accidentally delete it, control minus, and I'm just going to delete it and shift it to the left, enter. And then you get the reference error because it used to be referenced to this cell, but no longer exists. So Excel is confused on which cell do you want me to return here. Alright, so that was quickly the types of errors that we can make. Let's go ahead and learn how we can handle these errors. Now, the fastest and easiest way to go ahead and handle these errors is with this if error formula. So if I type if error, Excel tells us that it returns value if error if expression is an error and the value of that expression itself otherwise. So it's really actually kind of confusing in my opinion. Really, it's just saying, hey, if the formula that you're trying to write, if it returns an error like one of these, then I don't want you to go ahead and display NA or value. I want you to display something else. So let's put in this formula the value that we're trying to handle. Like, so if this value is an error, which it is, it says NA, comma, I want you to put something that's useful, like telling me that it is an error, and closing it up. And Excel, instead of saying NA, it says error. Or that's the purpose of this formula. Now, imagine if you needed to show these errors we're showing, but you needed to sum up this column. So I'm going to just put a quick sum formula, and obviously it won't sum. There's no numbers here, but it definitely won't sum because of all of these errors. But watch what happens when I go ahead and drag the formula down and handle them. Excel will still sum it and say, hey, there's nothing above here, so it's 0. But before, sum formula itself was valuing itself as a value error. I can even put 100 here and it will return 100. So adding any type of formula will work when you handle them. One last thing to mention is that you can actually handle or insert two if error formulas within itself. So, hey, if this first one is an error, then I want you to say, well, handle it and try this other formula here. And let's try this one. And if that's an error, then say, yes, yes again, they're both errors. So obviously it tried the NA and that was an error. So then it went over and tried the next one, which was the value error. And of course that's an error. So it returned 2 yeses. And that's how that formula works. Now, unlike the if error, the if NA formula will do the same thing except it only handles errors that are NA. These bottom 4 will not be handled if I use this formula instead. So if NA, it's the same arguments it's asking for or information down here. The value being the error, comma, return yes if it is an error. And of course it's going to return yes. But when I drag this down, nothing will be handled because these are different types of errors. This formula only handles NA errors. So depending on what you're using this for or what type of data you're using, maybe you only want to handle the NAs because those are the only ones that would make sense to handle, and all the other ones may truly be an error that you need to know about right away. So you don't want to handle those. Now once you get done learning these if error and if NA and start using them on a day-to-day basis, you're going to love them. You're going to be using it every single day, I promise. For instance, in this VLOOKUP formula, let's say that you use this formula and you dragged it all the way down to the bottom of your spreadsheet and half of the values came back, but the other half didn't. The first thing you're going to do is just wrap your VLOOKUP formula with an if error statement. So I'm just going to do that here. So if error, and then go to the end, and then put comma and type error, because I'd rather it say error than for Excel to return this error name unless you need it to. But I usually don't, because I still want it to tell me the sum total like it does here. I handled all these errors and I summed it up. While over here, I only handled the top one, and if I type sum, again, this isn't going to return a number. It's going to return a value error because Excel doesn't know what to do with these values in the sum formula. Now you got to go show how you're working smarter and keeping the integrity of your worksheet with these two new formulas.